Hi, my name's Elowen. Last Thanksgiving, I brought home a turkey and got handed an eviction instead. No warning, no kindness. Just a cold goodbye at the dinner table I paid for. But the worst part? That wasn't the beginning. It was years of silence, control, and quiet theft, until I finally said, enough. They thought I'd stay quiet, that I'd keep paying, keep bending, keep bleeding. So what really happened when I stopped? The last thing I expected was to be handed a verbal eviction notice while holding a warm casserole dish. I pulled into my parents' driveway, just as the late November sun dipped behind the church steeple at the far end of Ashbury's only Main Street. The sky was gray, the kind of color that made everything feel quieter. I parked carefully, as I always had, in the spot furthest from the porch, so Dad wouldn't say I was blocking his view of the mailbox. The pie box on the passenger seat had tipped sideways. I adjusted it and took a deep breath before heading up the steps. The wooden boards groaned under my boots, and for a second I almost turned around. Inside, the air was thick with the dry scent of overcooked turkey and burnt green bean casserole. It smelled like obligation. My father, Thayer, sat at the head of the table like he always did, arms crossed, face unreadable. Maribel, my mother, fluttered around with her usual fake busyness rearranging napkins that didn't need moving, opening and closing drawers like she was waiting for an excuse to be anywhere else. I set the pie on the counter next to the store-bought cranberry sauce I'd picked up on the way. No one looked up. No one said Happy Thanksgiving. Just the scrape of a fork across ceramic and the low hum of Thayer's old floor heater struggling against the cold. I pulled out a chair. No one told me where to sit, but that wasn't new. I'd grown used to being the extra limb no one asked for. I barely had time to place my napkin in my lap before Thayer cleared his throat and, without a glance, said, "You're too old to be freeloading. It's time you left." I thought I misheard. I looked up slowly. "What?" "You heard me," he said, slicing into the turkey like we were talking about the weather. "You've overstayed. It's time you got out." My fork hovered in midair. I pay half the mortgage. I cover the internet, the gas bill, most of the groceries. Doesn't make this your home, he snapped. Paying a few bills doesn't buy you a lifetime stay, princess. That word princess landed like a slap. I used to love it when he called me that. When I scraped my knees playing softball, he'd scoop me up and whisper, "My brave little princess." That was a long time ago. Now it was a weapon, a mockery. A reminder that I had once mattered, and now I was just a burden with a paycheck. I turned to my mother. She didn't meet my eyes, just stared down at her plate, chewing like she hadn't heard a thing. My throat tightened, but I didn't let the tears come. So that was the play. No warning, no discussion, just blindsided over stuffing and stale rolls. A silent conspiracy with polite smiles. "Is this because I didn't go to Aunt Lila's last week?" I asked, trying to make sense of it. "Because I had work?" Thayer scoffed. Always with the excuses. Work, stress, your deadlines. "You've been taking advantage of this family long enough." My jaw clenched. Taking advantage? I've been supporting this house while you've been, what? Drinking beer and watching reruns in your recliner? Maribel flinched, but still said nothing. "This isn't your house," he said, voice rising just enough to send a message. "We let you stay because we felt sorry for you. But sympathy doesn't pay rent." "Neither do you," I muttered. He slammed his fist on the table. The plates rattled. Enough. That was the end of it. There was no yelling match, no drama, just a verdict delivered between dry bites of turkey and fake gratitude. A cold declaration that I didn't belong and hadn't for a long time. I pushed my chair back, stood up slowly. The air felt heavier with every breath. I walked to the kitchen, picked up the pie still warm and placed it gently on the counter. No one moved. Not a thank you. Not even a glance. They didn't just kick me out, I thought. They planned this. Chose Thanksgiving because it made them look like the victims. I looked back once. Just once. Thayer had already gone back to carving the turkey. Maribel picked at her casserole like nothing had happened. "I guess we're doing this?" I said out loud, voice calm even. No one answered. Outside, the wind had picked up. I wrapped my coat tighter around me as I walked to the car. My hands didn't shake. My breathing didn't hitch. But inside, something cracked. I started the engine, but didn't drive away immediately. I looked up at the house I'd once believed was a home. The faded shutters, the sagging porch, the light flickering in the upstairs window where I used to do homework late into the night. They didn't just kick me out of the house, I whispered, gripping the steering wheel. They kicked me out of the illusion that I was ever really loved here. I drove off into the dark, headlights cutting through the silence. There were no bags packed in the trunk, no grand plan, just a woman who had finally seen the truth and wasn't afraid to leave it behind. I didn't hit the gas right away. I sat there, the heater hissing against the cold air that had crept in through the cracked door. My hands didn't tremble, but my chest felt tight like something invisible had snapped, and now all the pressure was flooding in. I didn't cry, not out of strength, out of clarity. I drove aimlessly for a while, down streets I'd known since I was a kid, passing darkened storefronts and flickering porch lights. The town looked the same, but everything inside me was shifting. The diner on Harlow Street still had its neon open sign lit, casting a weak red glow onto the slush-covered pavement. I pulled into a space but didn't go inside. I sat there, engine off, watching a couple through the window laughing over pie. "They think they ended something tonight," I murmured. "They don't know him just getting started." I stayed in the car until my fingers felt stiff from the cold. Then I texted the only person I could trust not to ask questions, Isolde. 10 minutes later, I was at her place. She didn't ask anything when she opened the door, just stepped aside and said, "The couch is yours." That was all I needed. Once she went to bed, I set my bag down and pulled out my laptop. The kitchen light hummed overhead, and the silence felt like armor. I logged in. Power bill, cancel. Water, cancel. Gas, click. The screen blinked before confirming deactivation. One by one, I unplugged every cord that had tethered me to that house, that life. I moved on to the bank account joint checking, the one Maribel insisted we open just for family emergencies. I remembered the way she'd smiled when I agreed, like it was love. It wasn't, it was leverage. I transferred the funds to my private account, one I'd quietly opened last spring when I felt the first real shift in their behavior. I left them nothing. Then came the cars. Both still insured under my policy, because it made sense, because I was good with money, because that's what family does for each other. I removed both vehicles, confirming they'd be uninsured by Monday morning. I didn't flinch. With every confirmation click, I wasn't just walking away, I was extracting myself, cell by cell, from their narrative. I wasn't doing this to hurt them. I was doing this to reclaim what I gave without being asked, what they assumed belonged to them by default. I paused only once, staring at the utility history. Years of payments made from my account. Hundreds of dollars drained each month while Thayer sat in his recliner barking at game shows, and Maribel thumbed through catalogs she never ordered from. They said I was freeloading. I was the damn backbone. A memory slammed into me, uninvited. Me on the roof in a thunderstorm last spring, nailing shingles down while Thayer yelled out the window about how I was doing it wrong. My jeans soaked, my fingers numb. He never came out to help, just cracked open another beer and turned up the volume. Another one. Maribel calling me from a ditch, sobbing because she slid off the road. Her tires had been bald for months. I paid for the replacements, took a personal day, covered the toe. None of that was remembered tonight. None of it bought me a seat at their table. I didn't feel regret, just rage that had cooled into precision. I scrolled through the online accounts, highlighting each with a sense of finality. Netflix under my name, cable, Wi-Fi, gone. I could already hear Maribel screaming when her shows didn't load. I hoped she called the provider and heard, in a robotic voice, that the account was closed by the primary holder. Every severed tie wasn't petty. It was power coming home to roost. I took a break to drink water straight from the tap, leaning against Isolde's counter. Her apartment smelled like cinnamon and soap. Her cat watched me from the hallway, tail flicking, silently judging. I sat back down and opened the last item, the emergency account. The one I used to think made me noble. Selfless, family-oriented. The same account they quietly drained over the years, always with a good excuse. I froze it. Not deleted, just locked behind a wall of paperwork and identity verification they wouldn't navigate even if they tried. It was nearly 2 a.m. when I typed a single note in the memo section of the final transaction. They never saw it as help, just expected support. But I'm not their backup plan anymore. I closed the laptop, the faint click echoing louder than it should in the small kitchen. They kicked me out, but I walked away with everything that actually mattered: my autonomy, my choices, my voice. And now they'd feel the void I used to fill so quietly. I didn't sleep that night, not really. I lay on Isolde's couch, wrapped in a blanket that smelled faintly of lavender detergent and cat fur, staring at the ceiling, eyes wide in the dark. The hum of the refrigerator in the next room was the only sound. But in my mind, it was noisy memories clawing their way out, like they'd been waiting for the silence. By morning, my eyes were dry but heavy. I sat up slowly, wiped my face, not from tears, but from the weight of things I hadn't allowed myself to feel. Coffee was already brewing in the kitchen. Isolde had left a sticky note on the counter. "Take what you need. I've got you." I poured a cup, sat back down with my laptop, and pulled up an old folder I hadn't opened in over a year. Inside it was an email marked Denver offer. I remembered the day it came in like it had happened just last week. A 6-figure salary, a leadership position at a marketing firm I'd admired since grad school, relocation assistance, health benefits that made my eyes water, everything I had worked toward for nearly a decade. I'd even packed a suitcase. I'd mapped out apartments within walking distance of the office. I'd started dreaming, and then Maribel cried, "If you leave, your father will spiral. You know how he gets when you're not around." She sat on the edge of my bed, trembling. Real or performed, I couldn't tell. She clutched the frayed sleeve of her robe like it was a life raft. "You're abandoning us," she whispered, "right when we need you most. And Thayer?" He didn't say a word. But the next morning, my car wouldn't start. The battery had been unplugged. I found the cable lying in the grass under the hood, like someone didn't even try to hide it. I never made it to the interview. I never left. I told myself I'd reapply, wait for the next opening. But life, as they say, got in the way, and guilt, well, it never left. Sitting there now, cup warming my hands, I opened a second folder. This one held documents from last year, the time I tried to buy my own place. Loan denied. I hadn't understood why at first. My credit had always been decent, and my debt manageable. But when I pulled the report, there it was. A credit card I didn't remember opening. It was under my name, but the authorized user? Maribel. The balance? Just under $9,000. When I confronted her, she didn't even try to deny it. "You make more than us," she said, eyes wide, like I was the one being unreasonable. "It's not like we bought a yacht, we needed help. That's what family does." "But you didn't ask," I said, voice shaking. She rolled her eyes. I didn't think I had to. I had paid off the card in silence. Not because I forgave her, but because the damage was already done. The house I'd wanted, gone. The interest rate spike, permanent. They didn't need to slam doors or scream insults. They just quietly clipped my wings until I forgot I had any. Every sacrifice I'd made, every dinner skipped, every birthday I spent working, every weekend spent fixing a leaky sink or negotiating with the electric company was rewritten in their minds as expected. Gratitude was never on the table, only expectation. I looked back at the email, the one from Denver. I'd saved it, even after I turned the offer down. I guess some part of me needed the reminder that I had once been wanted for more than my usefulness. I closed my eyes and whispered, "I thought I was being loyal, but loyalty built on fear isn't love, it's servitude." That line lingered in the room long after I said it. It hung in the air, soft but final. I leaned over and grabbed my phone, opened the credit monitoring app, and checked the latest report. The damage was still there, but smaller now. Manageable, fixable, and it was mine to fix. No one else would be touching it again. I scrolled through photos on my phone, landed on one from 4 years ago, standing beside the old Christmas tree, holding a mug, fake smile plastered on, while Thayer stared at the TV and Maribel unwrapped the present I had bought for her, pretending it was from him. That night, I'd cried myself to sleep, wondering why I still felt invisible. They took years from me. But they don't get tomorrow. Not anymore. The sun had just begun to slip behind the low rooftops of Ashbury when I sat down at the kitchen table in Isolde's apartment, with a yellow legal pad and a dull pencil. The evening light pooled across the hardwood floor, soft and amber, but I barely noticed it. I was deep in the kind of focus that only comes after a heartbreak you've accepted, not one you're trying to outrun. I'd already cut the cords, the utilities, the credit lines, the joint insurance, all severed, but something kept nagging at the back of my mind like an itch I couldn't reach. A hunch, or maybe just experience whispering, "You missed something." So I started listing every account I'd ever had with my name on it alone or shared. Cell phone, yes. Auto loan handled. Bank. That's where I paused. The joint checking account. I hadn't used it in almost a year. I'd moved most of my savings to a personal account after the credit card mess with Maribel. But that backup account still had both our names on it. I'd left it open, partly out of habit, and partly because if I am being honest, I still hadn't fully let go. I pulled it up online, entered the login I hadn't used in months, and there it was. A charge for $340 at a liquor store on the edge of town, another for $112 at a tire shop, a $29 recurring gym membership fee. I stared at the screen in silence, my pulse flattening, not rising. This wasn't rage. It was recognition. Thayer hadn't been to a gym since I was in high school. The last time he worked out, I still had braces and thought Friday night pizza meant we were bonding. And the tire shop? That wasn't even the one I used to go to. It was his. Always had been. I clicked further back. More withdrawals, more patterns. The account I thought of as inactive was anything but. It had become his personal piggy bank, my name still tied to the account, my silence mistaken for consent. And then it clicked. I remembered the night we opened that account. I was 26, just landed my first full-time job. Thayer had said, "Every family needs a backup, in case of emergencies." He insisted my name be listed as the primary, said he didn't trust himself to stay organized. Back then, I believed it was his version of transparency. Now I saw it for what it was, a carefully staged handover of control masked as vulnerability. When I brought it up last year, just gently, not accusing, he'd scoffed. "It's all family money, Elowen. Don't be dramatic. You act like we're stealing." And I'd let it go, because that's what they'd trained me to do, question myself first. Now I was done questioning. I grabbed my purse, keys, and headed for the credit union down on Main Street. It was a short drive, but I took the long way looping past the library, the old diner, the pharmacy with the flickering neon sign. Ashbury didn't change much, but I had. The woman at the bank recognized me. Her name tag read, Denise. She greeted me like I was still the girl who used to drop off deposit slips for Maribel when I was a teenager. "I need to freeze a joint account," I said, voice calm, "and remove a co-holder." Denise blinked. "Family account? Not anymore." The process was straightforward. ID, digital signature, a form or two. I changed the email address, requested a new card, and canceled the old one. Denise didn't ask why, but when she handed me the receipt, she said, "Sometimes doing what's right for you means leaving people behind who never saw you in the first place." I walked out into the chill evening air and didn't look back. Back at Isolde's, I scribbled a note to myself on the same yellow legal pad. They made plans with money that wasn't theirs. Now they'll learn what empty means. It wasn't bitter. It wasn't revenge. It was release. Just past midnight, my phone buzzed a text alert from the bank. Auto withdrawal failed. Insufficient funds. I smiled, not in cruelty, but with peace. I didn't scream. I didn't warn them. But now they'd know I was done being their fallback plan. I woke to the buzz of my phone vibrating against the nightstand. A groggy glance told me it was 6:17 a.m. The sun hadn't cracked through the blinds yet, but the calls had already started. 8 missed calls, 2 voicemails, no texts, just silence wrapped in noise. I didn't need to listen to know who it was. Thayer always called first thing in the morning when he wanted to catch me before I got in one of my moods, as he liked to phrase it. That usually meant before I'd had time to think for myself. Maribel? She preferred voicemails, long ones, drenched in trembling tones and words like betrayal, family, and disappointment. I tapped play on the first one. Her voice slid out of the speaker, syrupy and tight. "We're still your family, Elowen, no matter how mad you are. Please, baby, just call back. We can work this out. We always do." "No, you just pretend nothing happened until I forget why I was angry." That's not resolution. That's erasure. The second voicemail, predictably, was Thayer's. I hope you're proud of yourself, turning your back on blood. You think money makes you right? You'll regret this. Don't say I didn't warn you. There it was. Love, laced with a threat. I deleted both voicemails without saving them. No hesitation. My thumb didn't even shake. Then I texted Isolde. They're panicking. I'm not. She replied with a single word. Progress. I stayed in bed a little longer, watching the ceiling fan spin in slow circles, thinking about how many years I'd spent chasing their approval. Every phone call I'd answered on the first ring. Every plane ticket booked last minute for family emergencies that turned out to be guilt traps. Every weekend, I canceled plans just to be present for people who only ever noticed when I was useful. Not anymore. That afternoon, I met Caleb for coffee. He was back in town for a short visit, and catching up felt like another small reclamation of my own life. We found a booth in the back of the caf, warm light spilling from the Edison bulbs overhead. You look good, he said. Lighter. I'm trying to be, I replied, offering a small smile. It's been a month. He nodded, sipped his latte, then paused. I ran into Micah a couple weeks ago. I blinked. Micah. 2 years ago, I thought I was going to marry that man. Then he disappeared. No argument, no explanation. 1 week we were apartment hunting, the next he was gone. Caleb didn't notice my hesitation. He mentioned something weird, he continued, eyes cautious. Said your mom told him you were unstable, that you were struggling financially and might drag him down. It felt like someone poured ice water straight into my lungs. What? He said she cornered him at a farmer's market, told him you had unresolved issues, that he deserved someone more stable, more grateful. I couldn't speak. I just stared down into my untouched tea, hands frozen. I'd spent months blaming myself. I thought I'd pushed him away, been too guarded, too closed off. I believed in the quiet of my worst nights that maybe I wasn't worth loving, that maybe I had ruined it. And all this time it wasn't me. It was her. Maribel had gone behind my back not to protect me, not out of concern, but to sabotage something good. Something that would have made me more independent, harder to control. Are you okay? Caleb asked softly. I nodded once. Thanks for telling me. I needed to know. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't call Micah or write a scathing letter to my mother. I wrote a message, not to send, just to write. If someone shows you they're willing to ruin your happiness to keep you dependent, believe them. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't dramatic. It was true. And it was the kind of truth I'd spent too many years avoiding. I copied the sentence into my notes app, titled it Rules for My Future. A new section in a life I was rewriting, one honest line at a time. At 9:43 p.m., another voicemail came in. I watched the phone ring, didn't flinch, didn't even open the app to listen. I blocked both numbers, not out of anger, out of clarity. They'd had my attention for decades. Now they had my silence. And silence? Silence is a decision, not a retreat. I stood by the window, looking out over the sleepy street below. Somewhere in that quiet, I felt something shift, not loudly, not with fireworks or applause, but with finality. They played their cards. Now it was my turn, and I wasn't bluffing. The next morning came quietly, no calls, no buzzing from blocked numbers. For the first time in weeks, my phone felt like mine again, until a notification popped up from an unexpected place. Facebook. It wasn't a friend request or a memory alert. It was a message with a screenshot, sent from someone I barely spoke to in town. Hey, saw this and thought you should know. My stomach dropped before I even opened it. There, in full view of hundreds, maybe thousands, was a post from Thayer in the Ashbury community group, a public thread, a pity-fueled monologue. Some daughters forget who raised them, were sick, hungry, abandoned. I never thought the child I poured my life into would leave her aging parents in the cold. There were dozens of comments already. Old neighbors, church folks, former co-workers of his. So sorry, Thayer. Praying for healing. Kids these days have no heart. If you need anything, let us know. I stared at the screen, unmoving. It wasn't just a Lee, it was a trap. A manipulation masterpiece painted in vulnerability and weaponized shame. I whispered aloud, voice flat but sure. They're using sympathy as a shield. Ill-use facts as a sword. I didn't rush. I didn't cry. I didn't throw my phone or pace the room. Instead, I reached under the bed for a storage box I'd quietly added to over the years. Labeled in permanent marker, receipts, literal and metaphorical. I opened my laptop and spread the contents across the Bediever utility bill from the past 6 years in my name. Auto payments, gas and water, cell phone statements, repair receipts from the winter the pipes burst, and I was the one who paid for emergency service, not Thayer. I copied scans into a folder, labeled each image by date. Bank transfers? Documented. Checks written from my account to theirs? Screenshotted. Emails from Maribel asking for just a little help this month because they were short again? Saved. I didn't just build a response. I built a timeline. A picture that showed who had really been abandoned and by whom. At 1:13 p.m., I posted. No flourish, no rage, just facts. I've stayed quiet out of love. But since this story's now public, let me clarify a few things. Then I laid it out. Paid electric bill. $187.42 under my name. Car insurance, 2 vehicles. Drafted monthly from my checking emergency roof repair. Covered in full by me last December food, medical co-pays, even dog grooming for a pet they wouldn't let me name I ended with. They didn't lose a daughter. They lost the person who kept their lights on. It wasn't venomous. It was surgical. A neighbor named Darlene commented within minutes. I saw her patching that roof in the freezing cold. He just yelled from inside not to drop the hammer again. Then another post from someone who used to run the pharmacy. She always picked up their meds, paid in cash. No one ever mentioned that part. Like a tide, the narrative began to shift. Ashbury was small. Reputation ran deeper than blood. People remembered who shoveled their sidewalks in winter, who offered rides when someone's car broke down, who kept their head down and carried burdens no one asked about. I never asked for this war, but they brought it to my front porch and rang the doorbell. So I answered with proof. By nightfall, my post had more engagement than Thayer's ever did. Not that it mattered. He didn't post again. Neither did Maribel. Their silence online echoed the silence I now maintained in real life. I didn't respond to comments. Didn't ride the wave. I'd said what I needed to. That was enough. The house I grew up in? The image of it no longer hurt. Not because I'd forgiven, but because it no longer controlled the narrative of who I was. At 11:47 p.m., I turned off notifications, closed my laptop, and sat in the dark with a mug of tea in hand. The room was quiet, the kind of quiet that used to scare me. Not anymore. There's a silence that comes from being ignored, and one that comes from choosing not to engage. I had chosen the second. They'd painted me as cruel, cold, disloyal, and I had replied not with venom, not with sob stories, but with the truth. If they wanted a war, they were about to see I came with receipts. The envelope was there when I opened the door, a manila slab of silence left at my feet like a threat that didn't need words. No knock, no courier. Just wait. I didn't open it right away. I brought it inside, set it on the kitchen table, and stared. The last time I'd seen my name typed that formally was a college acceptance letter. This time, it was bolded on legal letterhead. Plaintiff Thayer and Maribel Connors. Defendant, Elowyn Connors. Allegations, elder neglect, financial exploitation, emotional cruelty. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because they'd finally outdone themselves. After everything they took, twisted, taunted, they now wanted the system to clean up the story they'd made a mess of. They didn't want reconciliation. They wanted revenge dressed in Sunday best. I whispered into the empty room, "They've gone nuclear." And I knew what that meant. I had to meet them there. By noon, I was on a Zoom call with legal aid in St. Louis. The woman who picked up Kay had kind eyes and a sharp tone. She transferred me to Jace, a paralegal who looked young enough to still be paying off undergrad loans, but had the steel nerves of someone who'd seen messier family implosions than mine. He listened without interrupting, scanned the PDF ID uploaded before the call even connected, scrolled silently, then looked back up at me through the screen. "Elowyn," he said, "this isn't just defense. This is a counterattack waiting to happen. We worked fast. Every folder I'd created financial records, screenshots, dates, times became ammunition. Every please help email from Maribel, every just cover it this time Venmo memo, even the Facebook thread, which had since been deleted but screen captured in full. We filed our motion within the week, counterclaim defamation, malicious prosecution, misuse of shared financial accounts. The court date was set. A month later, I stood in a courthouse that smelled like old carpet and cold metal. My name echoed through the hallway as they called the case. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't rise. I walked in wearing the only suit I owned, hair pulled back, documents in hand. Thayer was already there, sitting like a pastor about to deliver a sermon. Maribel clutched tissues she didn't need yet. Theatrics came early in their show. They brought binders. My team brought facts. When the judge called for opening statements, Thayer's attorney stood and introduced Exhibit A screenshots of alleged texts between me and my father. Messages that proved I knew about their financial suffering. Messages that confirmed I'd refused to help. Messages where I apparently typed, "You two deserve to rot. You got what you had coming." I didn't even blink. My lawyer, Carmen, didn't object immediately. She waited, let the courtroom sit in that lie for exactly 9 seconds, then said, "Your Honor, we ask to introduce Exhibit C." Jace stood, wheeled a small monitor to the front, and tapped the screen. Metadata, file path logs, app overlay detection, translation for the room. Those messages? Created in a fake texting app, time-stamped 2 weeks ago, not pulled from a phone, built from scratch. Gasps filled the room. Maribel finally used the tissue. The judge asked for silence, then slammed his gavel. Thayer's face didn't flinch, but his lawyer began sweating. The rest of the hearing blurred into specifics. Depositions, bank account audits, witness testimonies, screenshots backed by receipts. By the end, the judge didn't issue a ruling, said he needed more time. But the room had already shifted. Outside the courthouse, the October wind hit harder than I remembered. But it was clean. Honest. I closed my eyes and breathed it in. Jace joined me on the steps. "You know," he said, "a lot of people don't fight back. They just try to survive the noise." "I didn't have that luxury," I said. "They made this war public. I made the truth louder." He nodded. "That's the thing about family. When they lie long enough, they forget some of us learned how to write things down." We didn't shake hands. Didn't need to. I walked back to my car with no need for closure, just a next step. Because the court saw the truth. But now it was time for everyone else to feel it. By the time I got back to Isolde's, my boots were soaked, my fingertips cold, and my thoughts sharper than they'd been in weeks. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't need them. Instead, I dropped my coat, rolled up my sleeves, and opened my laptop. The courtroom had seen the truth. That wasn't enough. Not for a town that lived on gossip, not for a family that only cared when someone else was watching. So I created a folder, Google Drive, public link, titled it, "Since They Want to Talk Publicly, Here's the Full Story." There was no commentary, no dramatic captions, just cold, verifiable facts. Screenshots of mortgage payments in my name, property tax stubs signed by me, the auto-renew notices for their health insurance, the service contracts for plumbing, roofing, pest control. The old voicemail from Maribel sobbing because Thayer had lost track of rent again and ID paid it to keep the power on. All of it. I organized the files by year. I timestamped everything. No manipulation, just documentation. Then I posted the link on the same Ashbury community group where Thayer had weaponized Facebook weeks ago. That was it. No quote, no emojis, no hashtags. Truth doesn't need decoration. I closed the laptop and walked into the kitchen to boil water. By the time the kettle whistled, my phone buzzed with the first ping of notification. I didn't reach for it. Instead, I poured tea, added honey, and waited. Not for their response, but for the silence that would come after. The next morning, I woke to over 24 missed calls. But it was the headline on my feed that stopped me mid-sip. Ashbury family drama goes viral, daughters' docs spark town-wide reckoning. The article didn't quote me, didn't need to. It quoted the receipts. I scrolled further and saw a video. Maribel, shaky camera, dim kitchen light behind her, casting too much shadow. She clutched a tissue and spoke with that voice soothing, motherly, almost believable. "We're just hurt," she said. "She's our daughter. We didn't know she felt that way. We never meant to hurt her." She sniffled, dabbed at a dry cheek. It was all love. Maybe we got it wrong, but it was love. The comments came fast. "Then why lie about her in court? Love doesn't sue. Sounds like you're sorry you got caught." Someone reposted my Google Drive link right beneath the video. No caption, no insult. Just a hyperlink, like a mirror held up to a mask. By noon, the ripple had become a wave. Thayer was quietly removed from the church volunteer board. I heard through Isolde that the pastor had called it a conflict of spiritual integrity. Maribel's bridge club canceled the next game, then the next month's, then sent her a message. We're rotating hosts. We'll let you know if we need anything. I didn't cheer. This wasn't a win. It wasn't revenge. It was air returning to a space that had long been suffocating. Isolde texted, "This is the quiet part, right? Where you breathe again?" I stared at the screen for a second, then typed back, "It's where I stop bleeding." I meant it. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt level. Later that afternoon, I took a walk through downtown. The breeze had lost its bite. The trees were in that golden phase before bare branches, flame-colored and fleeting. I passed the library where I used to volunteer, the diner where I'd once met Micah, the hardware store Thayer never paid for when I bought him new tools he never used. No one stopped me. No one whispered. People nodded. One woman even offered a small smile. For the first time in my life, silence didn't feel like exile. It felt like arrival. I paused at the crosswalk, watching the light change, and I thought not about them, but about me. Who was I, now that they no longer defined me? Not just the girl who kept the lights on, not the daughter who stayed too long, someone rebuilding from rubble but not bitterly, not desperately, intentionally. They lost a daughter who stayed quiet for too long. Now I had to decide what kind of woman I wanted to become. The apartment was small, the kind with crooked baseboards and paint that didn't quite reach the corners, but it was mine, entirely mine. I signed the lease with a pen that barely worked and didn't care. The duplex was tucked into an older block just east of downtown St. Louis. It had a view of a half-dead elm tree and a laundromat sign that flickered when it rained. The windows stuck in the mornings, and the shower had exactly one pressure setting aggressive. But when I turned the key and stepped inside for the first time, the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt clean. Whole. Like it opened a book and the pages hadn't been dog-eared yet. The first thing I unpacked was a tiny bookshelf I'd carried from apartment to apartment since college. I lined it with cookbooks I rarely used, old journals I never reread, and one worn novel I always returned to when I didn't know who I was. Then came the coffee maker. Brand new, black matte. Cost more than I should have spent, but worth every cent. The first pot smelled like cinnamon. Not because of any special blend, just because I'd added it to the grounds. Because I could. Because no one was standing over my shoulder telling me it was a waste, or asking why I didn't use the money for something useful. This place didn't just look different. It felt untouched by them. A week passed quietly. I found myself opening the blinds more, walking barefoot on the creaky tile, taking long showers just because I could. I stopped checking my phone every hour. And that's when the email came. A neighbor back in Ashbury, someone I barely knew, sent a short message. "Lights haven't been on at your parents' place for days. Thought you'd want to know." I didn't answer right away. I let it sit in my inbox while I folded laundry and organized my closet. But later, curiosity tugged. I clicked the email open again and scrolled through the forwarded thread. There were whispers. Thayer had been denied a loan at the local credit union, tried to refinance something. Maybe the house. Denied flat. Rumor was, his credit was a mess. Maribel had been seen at a second-hand shop downtown trying to sell jewelry. Pieces I recognized from family photo skiffs I'd bought her over the years, when I still believed buying love was better than having none at all. No one defended them this time. Not the neighbors, not their friends. They'd run out of goodwill, out of stories, out of daughters to hide behind. I didn't gloat. That was never the point. I whispered, more to myself than to anyone. I didn't want them destroyed, just disconnected. There was a difference. That evening I dug through a box labeled Thanksgiving stuff that Isolde had helped me pack. Tucked in between old cloth napkins and a cracked gravy boat was the plastic cake topper from last year. The one I'd bought when I tried to make dessert feel celebratory even as the house turned cold. I turned it over in my hand once, then dropped it in the trash. Gone. Then I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a maple leaf I'd pressed between two books weeks ago. Burnt red, curled at the edges, still beautiful. I taped it into my journal, wrote one sentence beneath it. This year, I gave thanks for myself. Simple, whole, enough. The next day, I confirmed a job interview with a nonprofit downtown. Something small, communications work, nothing flashy but meaningful. Mine. Isolde and I made dinner plans for Friday Thai food and bad reality TV. I hadn't reread a single voicemail in over a week. I no longer waited for the apology that would never come. No longer paused when I heard my mother's ringtone echo from a stranger's phone. They weren't villains in my life anymore. They weren't anything. I didn't forgive them. Not entirely. But I no longer built my days around their ghosts. They'd raised a daughter who stayed too long, who gave too much, who mistook silence for peace and control for love. But they made a woman who left. And that woman? She built something better without them. Even now, with the dust settled and the noise gone, I don't look back in anger, I look back in clarity. I used to think silence made me strong, that surviving quietly was noble, but survival is not the same as living. And no one, not even your parents, has the right to define your worth or weaponize your loyalty. I didn't walk away because I hated them. I walked away because I finally loved myself enough to stop bleeding for people who kept handing me the knife. And maybe that's the hardest part. Realizing that healing doesn't mean getting an apology. It means choosing yourself anyway. So if you're watching this, and you've ever felt trapped, dismissed, or erased by the people who were supposed to love you the most, I see you. I've been you. And I'm telling you, there's life on the other side. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you thought would never hurt you? Do you believe setting boundaries makes you cruel or courageous? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If this story hit close to home, drop a 1 in the comments, or tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know how far this truth travels. And if you didn't like this video, that's okay too. Tell me why. Let's talk about it. This space is for real stories and real people. If this story made you feel seen, inspired, or just a little braver, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. You never know who might need to hear your story next.